You were never really one of us, Laurel. Ask your mother if you want the truth. My father said that to me at Easter dinner, in front of more than 20 people, while the ham was still being carved, and my 8-year-old daughter sat 3 chairs away in the dress I had buttoned for her that morning. My mother dropped her fork. My daughter looked at me and asked if we did not belong there. Then I saw the legal envelope under my father's chair, and at the far end of the table, my 84-year-old grandmother Evelyn reached into the same worn brown purse she carries everywhere and pulled out a yellowed envelope that had been waiting years for a night like this. My name is Laurel Bennett. I am 36 years old. I work night shift at Pine Ridge Regional Medical Center, and what happened at that Easter table did not begin with one cruel sentence. It began weeks earlier, with money I could not afford, a house my father had no right to promise away, and a lie my mother let me live under for years. I set the knife down on the cutting board because my hand had gone slick. Raymond was still standing at the head of the table, one palm braced against the back of his chair, chin lifted in that familiar way he used whenever he wanted the whole room to understand he believed he had moral authority. He had made Pastor Keen say grace, then waited exactly long enough for everyone to bow their heads and settle in before turning Easter dinner into a sentencing hearing. That was when I noticed the legal envelope under my father's chair. It was thick, brown, and stiff, the corners sticking out just enough for me to see it from where I stood. He had not blurted this out in anger. He had brought paperwork. My mouth felt dry. Then say it clearly. He looked at me, not surprised I pushed back, only annoyed. Your mother told me years ago that you might not be mine. I stayed quiet. I stayed decent. I raised you anyway. But this house, this family, what is left of my name, that goes to the child who was always really mine and who actually stayed. Across the table, Mason did not flinch. He did not look shocked. Tara's fingers tightened around his wrist under the edge of the table, small but not small enough to miss. She knew there was something coming, maybe not every word of it, but enough. Bonnie Pruitt was staring at my mother now. Lester glanced down at the envelope near my father's shoe, then across the table at Grandma Evelyn. Pastor Keen had that pinched look preachers get when they know something ugly is happening in front of them and cannot decide whether stepping in will help or make it worse. My mother still had not spoken. I could hear the little hum of the refrigerator inside through the screen door. I could smell honey glaze and baked ham and yeast rolls and the citronella candle my mother insisted on lighting every spring, even when it made the porch smell like lemon furniture polish. Everything looked normal. That made it worse. "You let me bring my daughter here?" I said. "You let me cook in this house, pay you every month, drag my life around your schedule, and you chose tonight to say this in front of her?" Raymond's jaw tightened. "Do not act like I owe you for what I did for you." "What you did for me?" The laugh that came out of me sounded wrong, too light, almost brittle. For one second, I thought I might actually lose control. Not because of him, but because Poppy was still watching me, trying to read my face the way children do when they know the adults have stepped into danger. "Mom," she whispered again. I reached for her hand without taking my eyes off my father. "It is okay, baby." It was not okay. Everybody at that table knew it. My mother finally found her voice, but all she did was say my name the way she always did when she wanted to soften something hard without actually stopping it. Laurel. That one word told me everything I needed to know. She was not going to deny it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Then came the scrape of a chair leg against the floorboards. Grandma Evelyn stood up slowly, one hand on the table, the other still resting on that old purse in her lap. At 84, she usually moved carefully, favoring her left knee, steadying herself before she took a full step, but there was nothing shaky in her voice. I told myself I would only open this if he ever got mean enough to do it in front of witnesses. Every eye at the table went to her. She unclasped the purse and pulled out a yellowed envelope, the paper softened at the corners from age and handling. She held it the way some women hold a church bulletin, gentle but certain. My father went pale in a way I had never seen before, not with anger, not with embarrassment, but with the look of a man who suddenly realized he was not the only one who had come prepared. "Grandma," Mason started. "No," she said. Just that. No. The porch was so quiet I could hear Poppy's breathing. I looked at the envelope in my grandmother's hand and then at the legal one under my father's chair, and all at once the whole shape of the night changed. This had not started with Easter dinner. It had not started with that sentence. It had not even started with whatever lie my mother had just let hang over my head in front of half of Briar Glen. Somewhere behind all of it was a plan, and somewhere behind that plan was a second plan, older and quieter, carried in a worn brown purse by the only person at that table who did not look surprised by what my father had done. If you want to understand why my grandmother had that envelope ready, why my father thought he could say those words in front of my daughter, and why I was still sitting at that table at all, you have to go back 3 weeks to the first time I realized Easter dinner was not going to be a family meal. It was going to be an ambush. 3 weeks before Easter, my life still looked manageable from the outside, which is usually how a trap works. I was working nights at Pine Ridge Regional Medical Center, 3 shifts a week most weeks, 4 when staffing fell apart, which it often did. Med-surg was not glamorous. It was call lights, med passes, bed alarms, charting, families asking for blankets at 2 in the morning like blankets were a cure, and that strange dead hour around 4:30 when everybody in the unit looked half haunted under fluorescent lights. But night shift paid enough extra to keep me and Poppy afloat. Not comfortable, not secure, just afloat. Rent on our apartment, my car note, groceries, gas, after-school pickup, Poppy's inhaler refills when the pollen got bad, all of it fit together because of those overnight hours. At the hospital, people knew what I was worth. Denise Carter, our charge nurse, trusted me with the patients who turned complicated after midnight. Eric Holloway liked to say the whole floor would collapse into legal evidence if I ever called out 3 nights in a row. "You are not allowed to quit," he told me one night, while adjusting oxygen on a post-op patient. "I have a mortgage, Laurel." I was hanging antibiotics at the time. Good thing I cannot afford to. That was the truth of it. I could not afford much of anything going wrong. The real problem was Poppy. Not Poppy herself. Poppy was easy in the ways that mattered. She could do homework at a kitchen counter while I packed lunch, fall asleep in the back seat with one sock half off, and carry on full conversations with stuffed animals for an hour without needing anyone else. The problem was that Briar Glen might as well have rolled up the sidewalks after dark when it came to childcare. There was no overnight daycare, no licensed night sitter service, no nice, flexible system for a single mother working 12-hour shifts. So on the nights I worked, Poppy slept at Grandma Evelyn's house on Sycamore Creek Road. Joanne would stay over if Evelyn was having a rough week with her knee or her blood pressure. That arrangement was the only reason I could keep my schedule. It was also the rope my father kept around my neck. Every month, I handed Raymond $595 in cash or by check, depending on what excuse he was using that week. He called it helping with food and utilities since Poppy was there several nights a week. It was too much, and he knew it, but the house was his kingdom, even if legally it was not, and he used access to it the way other men used threats. He never said, "Pay me or your daughter cannot stay here." He didn't have to. The pressure lived in every sentence, every look, every time he reminded me how much strain it put on the household to work around my schedule. By the second week of March, my whole life felt like rotating between 2 places where I was needed for what I did, but only one of them respected me for it. I would leave the hospital at 7:15 in the morning, stop for gas if I had to, pick up a prescription for Evelyn because she forgot to call it in, run by the dry cleaner to get my mother's choir robe hemmed before Palm Sunday, and still make it to Briar Glen Elementary in time for afternoon pickup. I kept spare sheets folded in the hall closet at Evelyn's for Poppy's room. I noticed when the cereal was low. I brought casseroles to church socials. I remembered who liked the potato salad with more mustard and which serving spoon my mother wanted with the green beans. I was the first one there, every holiday, every funeral meal, every Sunday lunch that somehow became my responsibility by default. In my father's mind, that was just what daughters did. In my mother's mind, it was because I was good at taking care of things. In Mason's mind, I do not think it registered as labor at all. It was weather. It was plumbing. It was just there. One Thursday afternoon, I picked up Poppy from school and drove straight out to Sycamore Creek Road because she had left her reading folder in the spare room and needed it signed before Friday. The dogwoods were starting to bloom by the ditch line, and the gravel in Evelyn's driveway popped under my tires the way it always had. Poppy ran inside first, calling for Grandma. I followed more slowly, digging in my purse for my keys, even though I never used them there. The back door was open to let in air from the porch. I got as far as the laundry room before I heard Mason's voice coming from the kitchen. "No, listen, once the house is mine, we can knock out that back room and do something about all that clutter." I stopped. He was laughing, the low, lazy kind of laugh he used when he was talking to Tara. I could see part of him through the doorway, one hip against the counter, beer bottle in hand like it was a Saturday and not the middle of a workday. "Grandma can have the little room in back if she is dead set on staying here," he went on. "Laurel and Poppy will have to figure out some other setup. Dad already knows that." It was not what he said that made my stomach drop. It was how casually he said it. Not if, not maybe, not one day. He said it like plans had already been made in rooms I had not been allowed into. Poppy came skidding back down a hallway with her reading folder in both hands. "Mommy, found it." I forced my face into something normal before she looked up at me. "Good. Get your jacket, baby." Mason still had not seen me. He was saying something about paint colors by the time I had Poppy buckled into the car. I shut the door with more force than I meant to, then stood there gripping the roof of the car until my hand steadied. On the drive back to our apartment, Poppy sang half of some song she had learned in music class and asked if Grandma could still come to Career Day next month. I said yes because I didn't know what else to say. Then she fell asleep before we got to the stoplight at Main and Archer, her head tilted toward the window, hair ribbons slipping loose. That night at the hospital, I couldn't stop hearing one word. Once. Once the house is mine. At 2 a.m, Eric passed me outside room 214 and gave me a look. "You good?" I nodded. "Just tired." Denise heard that and snorted from the nurse's station. "We are all tired. The question is whether you are dangerous." "Not tonight," I said. But something in me had shifted. It was no longer just that my father made me pay too much to keep my life functioning. It was that my brother was speaking like my daughter and I were temporary guests in a place that had been holding up my whole world. The next morning, after I had dropped Poppy at school and finally crawled into bed, my phone rang at 9:43. Raymond. I stared at the screen until it almost stopped, then answered. "You late this month," he said, by way of hello. "It is the 10th, and bills do not wait for the 15th. We are going to need to make some things more clear around here after Easter." The words woke me up faster than coffee. What does that mean? It means this arrangement is not going to run on assumptions forever. Then he hung up. No yelling, no direct threat, just that. That evening, I went out to Evelyn's with her blood pressure refill and a loaf of sandwich bread she liked from the grocery store on Route 9. She was in her recliner by the front window with a blanket over her knees. Raymond was outside on the porch messing with the latch on the screen door like he was lord of all he surveyed. I set the pharmacy bag on the side table and took out her pills to put in the organizer. "You need anything else while I'm here?" "You look pale," she said. "Worked last night." "That's not what I mean." I glanced toward the window. Through the glass, I could see my father tightening screws with exaggerated purpose. I kept my voice low. "Grandma, has he said anything to you about the house?" Evelyn did not answer right away. She watched Raymond a moment longer, then shifted her eyes back to me. "There are people," she said, "who hold a key long enough that they start believing they own the lock." I stopped with my fingers resting on the Tuesday morning compartment of her pill organizer. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "that some men get very comfortable confusing access with ownership." Outside, Raymond slammed the screen once to test the latch. I looked at him through the window, then back at my grandmother, and for the first time I understood that whatever was coming at Easter was not just about hurt feelings, it was about the house. Once I saw it clearly, I could not unsee it. Not the money, not even the way my father used money, the pattern behind it. Up until then, I had let myself believe Raymond was just being Raymond, cheap when it suited him, controlling when it benefited him, mean in ways that always stopped half an inch short of anything you could point to and call cruelty in public. But once Grandma Evelyn said the word ownership, every conversation I had brushed off, every check I had written, every little comment Mason made started lining up like fence posts along the same road. About a week and a half before Easter, my father called me while I was driving home from Pine Ridge after a 12-hour shift. "Come by the house," he said. "Back door. I need to talk to you." I almost kept driving. Instead, I pulled into the gravel lot behind Evelyn's place with my eyes burning from no sleep and the kind of headache that starts behind the bridge of your nose and settles in for the day. The kitchen smelled like old coffee and bacon grease. Raymond was already at the table, yellow legal pad low on his nose, like this was a business meeting and not a man cornering his own daughter before she had even taken off her jacket. "Sit down." I stayed standing. Poppy was in school. Denise had begged me to take an extra admission at 6 in the morning. I had not slept. My patience was thin enough to see through. "What is it?" He folded his hands. "Starting next month, your contribution goes up." "How much?" $860. The number sat there between us so hard I actually laughed once, short and disbelieving. "For what?" "Groceries, utilities, wear and tear. Poppy spends enough time here to count. She sleeps here 3 nights a week when I am working. Grandma and Joanne are the ones helping me, not you." His face changed at that, not red, not loud, just colder. "This household adjusts around your schedule, Laurel. Do not act like that costs nothing. $860 is more than my car payment. Then maybe you need to revisit your arrangements." There it was. Not a threat if you wrote it down, a threat if you had to live inside it. I stared at him. "You are charging me because I work nights and need my daughter safe? I am telling you this house cannot keep revolving around your life forever." He said it quietly, which somehow made it worse. Men like my father did not yell when they were sure of themselves. They lowered their voices and made you lean toward the blade. I picked up my keys from the table. "I will not be discussing this after a shift when I have not slept. Then do not be late this month." I left before I said something I would not be able to take back. Out in the driveway, I sat in my car with both hands on the wheel and counted to 30, like I tell nervous patients to do when they feel panic coming on. By 20, I was not angry anymore. I was scared. A few days later, First Baptist held its annual Friday fish fry in the fellowship hall. Of course I was there, because if there was a church dinner, a school raffle, a funeral dessert table, or a holiday meal, I was always there. I had dropped off a casserole I made after sleeping 4 broken hours, then went back in because my mother texted that they were short on paper napkins. The hall was loud in the familiar way. Fry oil, tartar sauce, sweet tea, folding chairs scraping the floor, men in boots laughing too loud, women balancing paper plates on one hand and babies on the other. I was halfway to the supply closet when I heard my name. "Laurel only chips in a little," Colleen was saying. "Raymond covers the rest, because that is the kind of man he is." I stopped behind the half-closed pantry door. Whoever she was talking to made a sympathetic noise. "He never complains," my mother went on. "He just does what needs doing." I stood there with a stack of napkins in my arms and felt something in me go very still. $595 was not a little. Not in Briar Glen. Not for a child sleeping in a room that already existed, under a roof already paid for. He had been taking my money and telling my mother some cleaned-up version that made him look generous. Worse than that, she was repeating it like gospel. When I came back out, Joanne was by the coffee urn, watching my face a little too closely. "You okay?" I set the napkins down harder than necessary. "Does Dad tell Mom how much I actually give him every month?" Her mouth tightened. That tells me everything I need to know. She touched my elbow and steered me toward the side exit, past the folding tables and the framed Vacation Bible School posters. Outside, the parking lot was cooling off under a pink March sky. Cars lined up crooked in the gravel. We stood beside my Honda, where nobody else could hear. "Your parents think you will keep taking it because you always do," Joanne said. "They think showing up means you will swallow anything." I crossed my arms. "He told her I barely help." "I know." "Then why does everybody keep acting like I owe him?" "Because," she said, "your brother was handed confidence and you were handed responsibility, and families like this spend years pretending those are the same thing." I looked away toward the church sign, the one out front with the plastic letters that still said "He is risen" before Holy Week had even started. Joanne lowered her voice. "And Mason only talks that big when he thinks nobody kept paperwork." I turned back. "Paperwork for what?" "Not here," she said at once. That answer followed me harder than if she had given me one. 2 afternoons later, I was downtown picking up Poppy's inhaler refill and a bag of Easter candy I should not have been buying but bought anyway because I was tired of every joy in our life requiring a budget meeting. Briar Glen Square is 4 old brick buildings, a barber shop, a florist, the bank, and Holloway and Price at the corner beside the pharmacy. I had just stepped off the curb when I saw Raymond coming out of the law office. He had a flat legal envelope tucked under one arm. He saw me when I saw him. The look on his face was not guilt exactly, it was irritation, like I had shown up where I had not been invited. "Dad," I called. "What are you doing here?" "None of your business." That was fast enough, to be honest. I stayed where I was. Since when do you go to a law office in the middle of the day if it is none of my business? He walked right past me toward his truck. "Do not start making up stories because you have too much time to think." I watched him drive off with that envelope on the passenger seat and knew Mason had not been fantasizing in the kitchen. Something was already moving. That night, I checked the Easter text thread my mother had started. Pastor Keene and his wife were coming, which was not unusual, but she had also added Lester and Bonnie Pruitt for pie after dinner, plus 2 cousins from Macon who almost never came unless someone was dying or getting engaged. It hit me all at once that Raymond was not just planning to say something, he was planning to say it in front of the right audience. He wanted witnesses. Friday night before Easter, Joanne called me just after I got Poppy out of the bath. "Come early Sunday," she said. "Bring the ham glaze if your mother forgets it again, but come early." I sat on the edge of Poppy's bed with a towel in my hand. "Joanne, what is going on?" "Do not take Poppy back to the apartment before dinner, and no matter what happens, sit beside Grandma Evelyn until she stands up." That was all. Sunday morning came gray and cool. I had barely slept. Poppy was bundled in the back seat with her church shoes off and her hair still in the loose braid I had done in the dark. By the time we pulled on to Sycamore Creek Road, the sky was brightening through the trees. I carried the pie plate in one hand and my overnight headache in the other. Grandma Evelyn was already in the kitchen when we came in. Cream cardigan, reading glasses, coffee untouched beside her, the old brown purse set squarely on her lap. She looked at me over the rims of her glasses, then at Poppy, then back at me. "Today," she said, "do not be the first one to leave that table." I nodded, though by then I already knew I was not going to be thinking about anything else for the rest of the day. The house filled up in layers the way it always did on holidays. First the food, then the noise, then the people who acted like the food and the noise had just appeared by the grace of God. Joanne and I worked from the kitchen while Poppy sat at the table in the breakfast nook, folding napkins into loose triangles that kept coming undone in her hands. She took the job seriously anyway, smoothing each one flat with both palms before carrying it out to the porch. "Those look perfect, baby." "They do not all match." "Neither do families." She gave me a look that told me she was not sure whether I was joking. By 10:30, the ham was glazed and back in the oven, the deviled eggs were chilled, the green bean casserole was waiting to go in, and the pecan pie was cooling beside the sink. Colleen floated through the kitchen twice, once to rearrange tulips in a mason jar, and once to check her lipstick in the microwave door. Each time she said she was just trying to make things nice. Each time she disappeared before anything heavy needed lifting. Joanne slid biscuits onto a tray and muttered under her breath, "Must be nice to attend your own holiday." I nearly smiled. Poppy carried the folded napkins out to the porch, one stack at a time. She'd changed into her Easter dress, pale yellow with white tights, and every few minutes she came back in for instructions she did not actually need. "Where does Pastor Keen sit?" "Where Grandma can hear him if he starts telling long stories." She grinned and ran off again. Mason and Tara came a little after noon with a bottle of Pinot Noir and one bakery pie still in the plastic clamshell. Raymond praised them like they had crossed the desert carrying medicine. "Good to see somebody knows how to show up," he said it loud enough for the kitchen to hear. Joanne kept buttering biscuits. I kept slicing ham. By the time everyone sat down, Evelyn had her purse on her lap, exactly where it had been when we came in that morning. Not under her chair, not on the side table, on her lap. I saw Lester notice it too. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Pastor Keen asked the blessing. Plates were passed. Ice clinked in glasses. Somebody laughed about the weather. The whole thing took on that deceptive holiday sheen where everybody is pretending to be one conversation away from normal. Then Raymond stood. "Before we eat, I want to say something about this family and where things ought to go from here." I set down the spoon I was using to serve the green beans. Across the table, Poppy's legs had stopped swinging. Raymond rested one hand on the back of his chair and looked down the porch like a man about to name a scholarship after himself. "This house has been the heart of our family for generations, and I have given a lot of thought to who should carry that forward. Not everybody values legacy the same way. Not everybody stays. Not everybody understands what family really means." Mason sat up straighter. Tara's hand went to her wine glass. I heard myself ask, "Who are you talking about?" His eyes landed on me so easily it was almost a relief. "You know exactly who I mean." "Then say it." He did. "You were never really mine, Laurel. Your mother told me the truth a long time ago." Every sound on that porch dropped out at once. Poppy turned toward me first. "Mom?" I reached for her hand under the table. "I am right here." Raymond kept going, maybe because he had rehearsed it, maybe because once a person decides to humiliate you in public, they usually get bolder if nobody stops them fast enough. "Your mother came to me years ago during a hard time in our marriage and told me what I deserved to know. I chose to keep this family together. I chose to stay quiet. I chose to raise you under my roof anyway, but blood matters, and so does loyalty. Mason is my son. He stayed. He belongs to this house. That is why when the time comes, this place goes to him." Poppy's fingers tightened around mine. "Does that mean we do not belong here?" Colleen shut her eyes. I looked at my mother. "Tell him he is lying." She opened her mouth, and nothing came out. That hurt more than his voice did. Joanne pushed back her chair before anyone else could move. Her tone was flat enough to cut wood. "Whose name is on the deed, Raymond?" His whole body shifted toward her. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one. This is Bennett property. Everybody here knows that." Lester lifted his head at that. I would not say everybody knows that. The porch went still again. Raymond glanced at him, then at Evelyn, and something unsteady flickered across his face for the first time all afternoon. Evelyn stood up. She did not hurry. She set her napkin down, rose with one hand on the table, and reached into the brown purse on her lap. What she took out first was not the yellow envelope. It was a folded copy of a recorded deed. "This house is in my name," she said. "It has been in my name since Harold and I bought it. It has never been in yours." Raymond stared at the paper like it had changed shape in her hand. Evelyn looked at the brown legal envelope under his chair. "Whatever you brought to this table cannot transfer what you do not own." Nobody breathed. Mason looked from his father to the deed to Lester, as if somebody else might save him from understanding what had just happened. Tara leaned back in her chair a full inch. Raymond found his voice, but it came out thin. "Mama, now wait a minute." "No." She drew the yellow envelope from her purse and set the deed on the table beside the ham platter. "You've had your minute." She opened the envelope and pulled out a letter, the paper old enough to curl at the edges. My eyes went to my mother before Evelyn even spoke. Colleen had gone pale under her makeup. "This was written by your wife to Wade Turner in 2004, Evelyn said. "Around the same time she told you Laurel might not be yours." Colleen whispered, "Please do not." Evelyn did not raise her voice. "In the letter, she says you had begun asking the wrong questions about Mason. She says if she could get you looking at Laurel, you would stop looking at him." I heard Bonnie suck in a breath. My mother covered her mouth. Raymond turned to her slowly, like an engine fighting to reverse direction. "That is not what I meant," Colleen said. "It was complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated. "I grew up in this house with you letting him look at me like I was the problem, and complicated is what you have?" Evelyn reached into the envelope again and removed 2 more papers clipped together. "Harold did not trust what she told you then, so he had a private paternity report done. Raymond, you are Laurel's father. You always were." My chair scraped back before I realized I was standing. Then she held up the second set. "And when you started carrying legal envelopes out of Holloway and Price, I had Margaret Price arrange a formal chain of custody test. Raymond is not Mason's father." Mason made a sound like the air had left him all at once. Tara took her hand off his arm. "No," Raymond said, but it was not a denial so much as a man hearing his own life collapse one board at a time. I looked at my mother. "Did you know what it did to me, growing up under that lie?" Her face crumpled. "I was trying to keep this family together." "No." My throat burned, but my voice held. "You were trying to keep yourself from losing what you wanted. You let me pay for that." Nobody interrupted. Not Pastor Daniel, not Joanne, not even Raymond. Pastor Keene finally spoke into the silence. "This should never have happened at this table." I looked at my father one last time. "I always was your daughter. I am just done spending my life trying to earn a seat you were never going to give me." Then I turned to Poppy. "Come here, baby." She was already half out of her chair when I reached her. I lifted her onto my hip, though she was getting too big for that, and with my free hand I picked up her sweater from the back of the chair. On my way past the end of the table, I met Evelyn's eyes. I did not trust my voice enough to thank her, so I nodded once and she nodded back. Then I walked off that porch carrying my daughter, while nobody behind me said a word I cared to hear. By the time I strapped Poppy into the back seat, my hands were shaking so badly I had to start the engine twice. She did not cry on the drive home. That somehow made it worse. She sat with her small sweater balled in her lap and watched the dark road slide past the windows, while the porch lights of Sycamore Creek Road fell behind us one by one. When we got to our apartment on the west side of Briar Glen, she went straight to the couch, took off her shoes, and curled under the throw blanket like she was trying not to take up too much room in her own home. I locked the door, leaned against it, and let myself breathe for the first time all night. My phone started lighting up before I even made it to the kitchen. Joanne, Denise Carter, one of my cousins, a church number I did not answer. I turned the phone face down on the counter and made Poppy a cup of warm milk because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. "Mom?" she asked finally. "Are we in trouble?" "No, baby, not us." She looked at me hard, searching for the part adults try to hide from children and usually fail. "Are we still family?" I crossed the room and sat beside her. I pulled her against me and kissed the top of her head, breathing in shampoo and Easter candy and the outside air caught in her hair. "Yes," I said, "we are." She nodded like she wanted to believe me before she actually could. The next morning, Briar Glen felt exactly like Briar Glen. Same hardware store, same Baptist church sign on Main, same women buying produce at Keller's Market. But the air around my father had changed. Small towns do not need headlines. They work on silence, on pauses too long to be polite, on who stops talking when a certain truck pulls into the feed store. By Wednesday, people at Pine Ridge had heard enough to ask, in the careful tone people use when they know they are close to something raw. Denise found me charting after shift change, set a cup of bad cafeteria coffee beside my keyboard, and said, "I am not asking questions. I am just telling you that whatever that family circus was, you walked out standing up." I kept typing for another second before I looked at her. "Thanks. You look terrible." I smiled without meaning to. "That too." She tapped the desk. "Then keep showing up. Do not let anybody else tell your story for you." That was the thing. I was showing up. I still had patients to discharge, med recs to finish, a child to get to school, laundry to fold, lunchboxes to pack. The truth had blown my family apart on Sunday, but Monday still came at 6:15 in the morning and wanted its pound of flesh. I stopped paying them that same week. Not dramatically, no speech, no final check with a note attached. I just didn't send it. Instead, I called Joanne first, then Grandma Evelyn. We worked out a real schedule for Poppy on my night shifts. 2 nights at Evelyn's when she felt up to it, 1 night at Joanne's if needed, and Denise agreed to be my emergency school contact if a shift ran over or something changed last minute. Grandma Evelyn would not let me offer money. "You paid enough to stand in your own doorway," she told me over the phone. "I should have put a stop to that years ago." I let the silence sit there between us, because she wasn't wrong. A week and a half after Easter, Mason texted me and asked if I could meet him at Sweet Jane's. He was already there when I walked in, sitting at the corner table by the freezer case, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee he clearly had no intention of drinking. No Tara, no swagger, no practiced grin. Just my brother looking like somebody had reached inside him and removed a beam he'd been leaning on his whole life. Poppy was at school. I sat down across from him. He looked at me for a long moment and then down at his hands. "I do not know how to do this." "Try honesty." His mouth twitched once, humorless. "Fair enough." I waited. He swallowed. "Are we still family?" It would have been easy to say yes and move on. Easy and false. I folded my hands on the table. "The lie is not your fault. But what you did with the life that lie gave you, some of that is." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the cup. "You got to be the son Dad bragged about," I said. "You got the room, the praise, the benefit of every doubt. You watched me do the cooking, the driving, the money, the showing up, and you never once asked why that all belonged to me by default." His jaw tightened. "I am not saying that because I want to punish you. I'm saying it because if you are asking me whether we are still family, that answer depends on what kind of man you are going to be now." He looked up then, finally. "I did not know." "I know," I said, "but you liked not knowing." That one landed. He sat back and rubbed a hand over his mouth. "I am trying to figure out what is even real now." "So am I." We sat there a minute with the low hum of the freezer and a little kid in line asking for rainbow sprinkles. Then Mason nodded once, like he was accepting a sentence he had earned. "I'm sorry," he said. It was not enough. It was not nothing either. Colleen came to my apartment 4 days later with a cardboard photo box and a face so tired she looked 10 years older than she had at Easter. I opened the door but did not step aside. She held the box against her chest. "I found these in the linen closet. I thought maybe you would want them." I took the box. Inside were school pictures, a dried corsage for my senior prom, a hospital bracelet when Poppy was born, things she had kept while helping build the story that I had never really belonged. "Why are you here, Mom?" Her eyes filled immediately. I was trying to hold everything together. "No," I said. "You were trying to keep your version of everything together." She winced. "I am not saying this because I want to punish you. I'm saying it because you did not just lie to Dad. You let me grow up under that lie. You let him look at me like I was temporary, because that was easier than making him look at Mason the way he should have." She cried then, but quietly. One hand pressed to her mouth, like she was still afraid of being heard. "I am not cutting you out of Poppy's life tonight," I said, "but I am not opening this door and pretending we are okay. You do not get to arrive with a box and call that repair." She nodded, tears slipping free. "I know. Poppy gets to decide how close she wants to be. Not you, not me, her." Another nod. Then she turned and walked down the stairs slower than she had climbed them. A few evenings later, I went out to Sycamore Creek Road after dinner. The porch was quiet. No folding table, no Easter dishes, no polished performance. Just Grandma Evelyn in her rocker with a cardigan around her shoulders and the sound of tree frogs starting up in the ditch. I sat beside her. She looked out toward the dark yard. I waited too long. "Yes," I said. She nodded. "I know." After a minute, she added, "I kept thinking there would be a better time, a cleaner time, but people like your father only tell the truth when they think they are safe inside a lie." I let that settle. "The house stays with me until I say otherwise," she said, "and when the day comes, it will not go to the loudest voice in the room." I looked at the porch railing, at the spot where I had stood with the ham knife in my hand, and for the first time, the house did not feel like something I had to win in order to matter. "I do not need a reward, Grandma." "I know," she said. "That is why you are the only one I trust with one." It took most of the spring, a little overtime, and my tax refund, but by early summer, Poppy and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Briarglen, closer to her school and farther from every road that led past my father's front porch. It was not fancy. The carpet was older than I liked, and the kitchen cabinets had been painted too many times, but Poppy got her own room. She picked a sage green comforter and taped a hand-drawn sign to her door that said, "Poppy's room, knock first." One Tuesday night, we sat at our little kitchen table eating pasta from bowls that did not match. Her homework was spread beside her glass of milk. My scrubs were still in the dryer. The window unit rattled every few minutes, like it was thinking about giving up. Poppy looked around the apartment, then back at me. "Mom, are we a real family now?" I set my fork down. "We always were," I said. "We just do not have to beg anyone to see it anymore." She thought about that, then nodded and went back to her noodles, like children do when you finally tell them something true enough to rest on. That was the thing Easter changed. Not my blood, not the house, not even my father. It changed what I was willing to pay for a place at a table that was never built for me in the first place. And it made sure my daughter would not grow up thinking love is something you earn by staying useful and staying quiet. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect, I would love to know what that moment looked like for you. Leave it in the comments. And if stories like this mean something to you, stay with us. There is always another one waiting, and sometimes hearing somebody else survive it helps you believe you can too.